So in this hour on my grind, I'm going to ask you a simple question. Yes. What is the last book you read? You know, they make this comment. Growing up, there was this comment that you want to hide the truth from an African. Put it inside a book. So I'm going to start. Brian, what's the last book you read?
BBI.
Iyo ufala ndestaki. Hata kusema gazeti. So you don't read?
I'm not a fan of reading. Yeah.
You know, people usually when you ask someone about, reading, it's almost like a social class.
Yes.
Because, when you ask, what was the last book you read? Mtu anaanza Google zile words zote zenye. No, I've read Bill Gates' autobiography of how to be a billionaire.
Yes.
Namuliza hiyo ni kitabu gani wewe cha kutudanganya?
Ama ile book kila msee Nairobi, Kenya mzima lisoma. Rich Dad Poor. Ni Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Hata ujesi.
Nimejaribu kwa
wewe kuna vitabu zote unasoma. The last book ulisoma ni How to Pass KCSE. Kwenda huko. But it's true. People don't read. And worse still, if you grew up in a household where your parents don't like books, chances are hautai fall in love with books. But better yet, have you ever thought about writing a book?
Ni poems tu ndizo tuliandika zile za high school, zile ma letters.
Bado tu kwa KCSE wewe.
Imagine. I'm not moving out from that. By the way, I think that's the last time I actually even wrote a composition. After hiyo ilikuwa tu kizungu ile kudanganya lecturer that najua vitu naandika.
Okay, perfect. Because in studio we've got Kinyanjui Kombani. He's an author. He's written how many books now?
This is my 20.
You how?
13 by myself and 7 with other people.
Hey, so he's definitely in that space. So make sure you listen in because we're going to be talking about how he got involved in books. And does Kenya really have a reading culture?
Vibes Radio, we rule the nation in this generation.
Sana Ipei Tande with Rastaman, bringing us to 24 minutes past 9 a.m. Akinapenda sana. Guy. Sana. Yo, man. 10 and a 10 and a 10. All right. Undio Beyonce wa Kenya. Hata sijamaliza.
Kwanza after ile song yake kwa heri.
Hii hapa. Hii Rastaman nakwambia the first time nilisikia tu hivi. Paka nikasema I think I'm going to look for Rastaman. Ai.
Ukakuja
lakini nikakumbuka spenangi Rasta.
Ukakuja studio kwa Brayo. Kanywele yake vinye siko combed nini.
Nani umekuambia ujingishe kwa history?
Lazima niringe kwa box.
Haya, hebu ringa, turingie. What's the last book you read?
Harry Potter. And this was 10 years ago. Yeah.
Well, did you read the book before the movie or the movie before the book?
I read the book before the movie.
Okay.
Yes.
So, we've got an author in studio. His name is Kinyanjui Kombani. Good morning, Kinyanjui.
Morning. Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So the first thing we want to ask is, how did you get into writing?
I started by doing comic books, actually. At first, I used to draw comics, and then I went into fiction when I went to campus. So I did a couple of short stories, and I did my first novel in campus. Yeah.
But that's not what you went to do when you left campus.
When I left campus, I went and joined the bank. So now I'm now a banker.
As in banking, comics.
Very different.
Very different.
But also very related, because you also need a bit of creativity. Like in my career, I've sold, I've been in sales, I've been in service, I've been in leadership, and all those things require a bit of creativity. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned comics because I was watching the first Comic-Con in Africa, which happened in Johannesburg. Was it in Johannesburg or Cape Town? And they'd invited all these comics to come in and talk about, the skill and the craft. At that point, when you're drawing comics, did you have anyone you're looking up to?
Yeah, I did a lot of my people that I was looking up to, people like Frank Odoi. Frank Odoi was a Kenyan cartoonist. He died. And then Paul Kelembo, of course, Mado. Those are the guys that actually Mado is my inspiration because he had a comic called Miguel CD, which was a detective story. So I also had my own detective story.
Nice.
That I did in high school. So
how did you transition from I'm doing comics to now I just want to focus on the words?
Because I got into a competition that was doing a short story. It was a short story competition, so I entered my short stories there. And then I gave it to my lecturer to have a read through. And he told me it's fantastic, and even offered the number of a publisher that I went to. That's how I started going.
That's how you started.
That's how I started going into prose fiction now. Yeah.
So, I mean, what was the first book you wrote?
It's called The Last Villains of Molo. It's been a study text in Kenyan universities and also in Berlin, in Germany.
Yeah.
It's about the clashes in Molo in 1992.
Why that particular story?
Because we don't, people know about the post-election violence in 07. What they don't know is that a lot more people died in Molo. A lot more people were displaced in Molo. And the genesis of any other election violence we've had, you can trace it from Molo in 1992.
Wow.
Yeah.
And in terms of you writing about Molo, the previous hour we were talking about King Kaka with Wajinga Nyinyi, and now about Molo. Did people come and shtua you and scare you and say, oh, you guys, you're talking about something that guys didn't know about, so we'll sue you, we'll take you to court? Or it was that story that guys just said, this is just fictional?
No, I think because a lot of the things that were in the book are actually things that happened. So if you talk about an attack that happened, it actually happened in real life. I've not had anybody coming to me and telling me they're suing me, but people have come to me and given me a lot of feedback. Some people said because it is a story that pits the Kikuyu against the Kalenjin. So there are always varied comments,
Opinions.
You are so lenient on the Kalenjins, is it because you are a Kikuyu, or you are so harsh on the Kalenjins, or you are so harsh on the Kikuyus, but nothing like, I'm going to kill you. Maybe it's because you said people don't read. Maybe that's why.
Which was my next question.
Yeah.
Does Kenya have a reading culture? Because, we were actually talking about this off air. Brian, clearly you didn't read, but when I was in primary school and in high school, some of our reading culture, our book clubs, we didn't then think about them as book clubs, but when you get that Sweet Valley High book, at that point there was rarely any local authors that were being promoted aside from in school. So you'd find the Sweet Valley Highs in the supermarkets, the magazines, and you would share them. But that's where it ended.
I think we may say that we don't have a reading culture, but I think the reading culture is growing.
Yeah.
I have personally have seen a lot of people just straight out buying books for fun. Because I think what we've done with our education system is that we've made it such that you rarely buy books for fun.
Yeah.
You buy books because it's a set book. So people will talk about, Kina Sikunjema and other set books, but not books that are not on the curriculum.
Yeah.
So what you're doing right now is actually trying to grow the reading culture. There's quite a lot of activities around that. We have festivals, we have, and all those book clubs and those activities. So my answer is that yes, we have challenges, but we have a growing reading culture. It's growing.
I know that if there's one genre of books that Kenyans love, it is how-to books.
Yeah.
How to get success. Because every single pastor out there, including Pastor Nganga, I think, have books. And those books sell out.
They sell a lot, yeah.
They sell out. Like, you find someone, and then you're just like, easy vitabu zote zinasema the same thing. So Kenyans actually like to read about success and how to improve themselves.
Yeah. And it's a factor of the economy as well. Like there's a book I saw in the streets, How to Be a Millionaire. In fact, I remember the guy was actually selling it. He doesn't look like a millionaire himself, but he has a book that is selling. So people want to get that kind of success. Yeah.
All right. We'll come back in studio. We've got Kinyanjui Kombani. Whatever questions you've got, remember you can use hashtag VibesMVP. Ama pia unaweza tupigia simu 0719012700.
Vibes Radio, we rule the nation in this generation.
All right, in studio, we've got Kinyanjui Kombani. He is an author, and he's just told us about Den of Iniquities, which, is it available? Where can people buy these books?
It's available everywhere. It's available in Textbook Center, Raffle Books, everywhere you can buy books, Prestige Bookshop. Yeah.
There's a lot of people who are listening to you right now, and of course they want to ask, usually the challenge, everyone feels like they're a writer. Why? Because we did 844, and we used to write compositions.
The day I'll never forget.
The day I'll never forget. And that is why I will never go back to Shago. Then that's the last line.
Yeah.
Then you have to write 5,000 words. Okay. Yeah. So how did you... What are some of the challenges you got when you're writing books?
I think the challenge that when you're starting out is it's very difficult for you to get a publisher because publishers are looking for books that are going to likely become set books. So if you have a book that doesn't, fit that slot, it becomes difficult. And my first book took about 6 years to get published. Now I'm at a good place where I have publishers who tell me, write, will publish. But that has taken 16 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
the challenge is, first of all, like when I was starting out, we didn't have a lot of resources. We didn't have writer communities like we have right now. Yeah.
When you started 16 years ago, ulikuwa unaandika tu hivi kwa karatasi ama you using a typewriter
Karatasi. And I
Did you
still
just
do that
ask
sometimes.
typewriter?
Yeah, 16
Okay.
years ago
Mimi si
typewriter
mzee
hiyo.
sana, Brayo.
Owie.
Shade,
Did you just ask if he was using a typewriter? Although,
But I was using,
I wanted to buy a typewriter when I was writing. Even now, even today.
Okay, but I was using I don't know if you remember, there used to be some computers called Pentium 2.
Yes.
That was my first computer.
Okay.
It
16
used to-
years.
16 years, yeah.
Wow. Because there's a lot of people who say that, if you're really writing, you gotta use your hand and, put it down.
I don't think there's any rule as to how you should do it. Sometimes I use my pen and paper.
Yeah.
Sometimes I use my laptop. I even have a software called Scrivener that helps you write and get your ideas together. But one thing I've discovered is that no amount of software will give you the focus. You just need to sit down and write. However you do it.
Take us through your process.
So I let a story like marinate in my head for a few months, and then that time I'm gathering ideas, characters, trying to build them in my mind, and then I start writing 7th or so month. When I start writing, I decide on a daily target. So if I have 2 months to submit the manuscript, and I know I have maybe like the end of it is about 60,000 words. So I know if I have 2 months, that means I have to do 1,000 words a day. So I just decide which time will I schedule for my 1,000 words.
So basically, as in wewe kila siku ni composition unaandika.
Composition moja kila siku.
Yo.
60 compositions.
Yo.
Yeah.
So this is something, if there's a young person who's listening to us right now who's in school, any kitu unaweza fanya.
Anybody can do it. You just need to have a story and you just need to read a lot to get to understand how other people do it.
Yeah.
Because if you don't read, then it's going to be difficult for you.
Kinyanjui, we are in a space where Africa is really, in that, we would say at the cusp of wanting to tell our own stories by ourselves, because most of the stories from Africa, like when you are in school, when you are reading about most of the places that you've now traveled and seen, you're like, how did we even get this information down? And when you were speaking, you said that it can be hard until you get your book as set book.
Yeah.
So is that the only avenue? Is that one of the most richest avenues to get finance?
If your book becomes a set book, you are likely to sell in Kenya. You're likely to sell about 400,000 copies a year.
Whoa.
Now in Kenya, if you do 1,000 copies, you are a bestseller of a book that is not a school curriculum.
Yeah.
So you can imagine we don't really sell as many books. So if you can get into the set book, then that's easier. The challenge comes when you have to really, kill your creativity.
Yeah.
Because you have to think, do I put my themes? You know the way people put themes first. You put your themes first, then you start getting a story around the theme. I want to write about corruption. That kind of gets into the way of your story. So like for me, I put a character and then I let things happen to the character, not the other way around. Yeah.
So it's still sort of relatively not yet grown industry.
It's growing, not yet grown. We have people for the first time who are saying, my first book is of pawns and players, and I only saw it because, let's say, Brian retweeted it or somebody else, talked about it. It's growing because we don't pawns and players. We did about 3,000 copies in 2 days, so we sold out in 2 days.
Wow!
And it's only because there was a lot of hype about it. Yeah.
All right. So in 2019, or rather 2020, in the next decade, technology plays a big part in selling
A big
books.
part. I've sold more books on Twitter than I've sold in the bookshops. Yeah, and it's only because of Twitter. People have conversations.
Yeah.
And all that. Yeah.
Let's talk about audiobook. I mean, not audiobooks. What are they called? Online soft copy books.
Yeah.
Do they do as much as physical copies?
No. And I have an example from actually one of my books called Den of Iniquities. We sold about 15 or so thousand copies of the book. And can you guess how many we've done online? And it's available online.
I don't like reading books online, so I'm gonna say one.
Actually, you've done 7.
So, you see, I
So
wasn't
if
far.
yeah, so you're actually not far. So it's a factor of so many things, including how do we actually market the books?
Yeah.
Because you can't put a newspaper advert and market an e-version. You have to be digital.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of our publishers are not. Yeah.
So that's a gap
So,
there.
yeah, it should not be a place where you have more, let's say, Twitter followers than your publisher. Publisher should be actually up there, you know.
True.
Yeah.
And since we are talking about ebooks and online, how are you able to combat piracy?
So for me, what I've done is that for most of my books, I don't do e-versions until I've broken even. The reason is that the minute you have it as an e-version, the next day it will be shared on PDF.
Yeah. I don't
And
like.
that's what is now going to kill.
There's something
You
so
remember.
sweet about just, opening the book and smelling the paper and, finding a tree somewhere and just, sitting down there and then start reading The Den of Iniquities. I'm going to ask you a question that we don't like to, no artist likes to be asked, but which one is your favorite?
It's difficult
I
because each of the, it's like children. Each
Yeah.
of the stories has a story within it. I would say Last Villains of Molo because it's the one that I actually put my heart and soul into it. I could not write anything else for about 8 years because I thought that I was going to write only one novel. I can also say it's Pawns and Players because that's why I really enjoyed writing. I could picture the characters. I think I even did one. Brayo was one of the characters. But of course, because of losses,
Wait, this Brayo?
Yeah, this
Yeah.
Brayo. So there was some guy from the agency who was doing a campaign, but then I saw that he was going to sue me, like Waigoro. I decided to now change it a bit. But I had much more fun writing of Pawns and Players because I'm in a place where now I'm much more comfortable in my writing. I'm not trying to prove anything.
So your stories are more fictional.
Yeah, and about social issues.
And
More
social
fiction,
issues.
a bit of reality there. Like my story here is about extrajudicial killings. It's a reality, so you put a fictional
Twist.
twist to it. Yeah.
Because another thing that we're always asking is when you look at like authors, like for example, he mentioned
Harry Potter.
You started by saying you are drawing comics. When will the comics and the author meet? Because there's a lot of Luanda Magere's story. There's the story of Kinyanjui Kombani, and when if you check with most Kenyans, chances are their first book was a sci-fi or but we don't have a lot of those from Kenya. I actually don't know any sci-fi book from Kenya.
Yeah, so I'm working on a couple of collaborations with some artists, one in Kenya and one in India. We just started having those conversations. It's still far off, but it's something that I look at in the future doing. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing what you have, Kinyanjui Kombani. In fact, we've got a bunch of books here we want to give out to you. When we come back, we're going to ask you a question as we wrap up the show. Thank you so much, Kinyanjui, and have a great day.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Vibes Radio, we rule the nation in this generation.